On behalf of Dr. Fadlu Khouri and the organizing committee, I welcome you all to the Presidential Symposium on Women at AUB Institutional Initiatives. I'll allow myself a few minutes of introduction. Pamela Conrad, a NASA scientist who researches extreme environments on Earth to better understand the surface on Mars, stated once that her main concern is not the harsh environment or the hostile environment, but how to go to the bathroom while clothed in protective gear designed for men. Today, we no longer ask how far women can go and what they can achieve, but we ask the more pertinent question of how to remove all barriers in offering them equal opportunity. AUB, under the leadership of Dr. Khouri, is asking these tough questions, launching institutional initiatives, and putting systems in place towards that end. AUB has made great strides in leveling the playing field for women. However, there's more work, and it's hardly over. In his 2000 opening ceremony speech, Dr. Waterbury declared his policy, and I quote, to increase the number of women in our student body, in our faculty ranks, and in our senior administration, end of quote. From there, with his appointment of the first female dean, a journey of empowerment was launched and translated into an increasing representation and placing of women in leadership positions, which are still central targets and continuing practice. But as many institutions have realized, representation and leadership are essential but not enough. Universities that have advanced the issues of equity are recognizing that much more is needed. An infrastructure of opportunity, empowerment, and accountability needs to be put in place. To become a community where, and to borrow from Gloria Steinem, the word gender does not exist, we don't only need to establish or generate equity, but also to safeguard it through sustainable institutional systems. Today, AUB is at that threshold, the search for and the implementation of institutional initiatives and infrastructure of equity. Many are already in place, and more are anticipated to ensure a more sustainable and long-term process that can achieve the legacy Dr. Khouri spoke of in this opening video. Seeds for diverse mechanisms are planted, from awareness campaigns to legal frameworks to educational programs. An infrastructure is being set in place with much more to follow as the recommendations of the Task Force on the Lives and Careers of Women at AUB translate into action. On the front of discrimination and harassment, we've already advanced with a system in place. In 2003, the first non-discrimination and anti-harassment policies were introduced. They were backed up by the Harassment and Discrimination Task Force in 2009, and recommendations of the task force were approved in 2011. In August of 2014, the Provost Office appointed the first Title IX coordinator, Trudy Hodges. That step was followed in January 2016 by President Khouri's formation of the Equity and Title IX Policy Working Group to further the university's efforts in that direction. But we've also moved in many fronts recently, both by faculty and administration. In the last 2 years, the Gender Equity Group was formed, and it held conferences and other events and activities. Also, the KIP project was founded, and it took a course of 2 years under the directorship of Dr. Charlotte Karam. On December of 2015, President Khouri announced the formation of the Task Force on the Lives and Careers of Women, who submitted their report in the following year. And in 2006, Women and Gender Studies Initiative was also launched in the English department of Faculty of Arts and Science. Last year, 3 very important events also took place, from a conference with the AUB Stanford Women in Data Science to 2 major establishments of one of the Rand Abdair Leadership Award in recognition of outstanding leadership in supporting the careers of women. And in May of the same year, the Altaf al-Sabah Visiting Chair in Women and Societal Development Studies was also established at the Faculty of Arts and Science. This is just a quick briefing. These and many more that you will hear about today are really about an environment in which students, faculty, and staff are empowered to be effective agents of change on campus and beyond. Today, and against the President's speech at the opening ceremony yesterday, we stand to celebrate the achievements, recognize the challenges, and hopefully leap forward. We stand with a sincere intent to systematically break down the barriers constraining women's participation and effectiveness, improve prevailing structures, policies, and practices, and engender transformation in their climates. This symposium is a step in that direction, is recognizing that systematically enabling equity requires planning and implementation of comprehensive organizational transformation initiatives. Today, we will hear from 3 panels. I will quickly list them. The first panel represents the systems that are already in place, and it will tackle equity and Title IX, and will be moderated by Professor Charlotte Karam. The second one is really about the findings and the recommendations of the task force on the lives and careers of women, which carries with it a lot of steps forward, which will be moderated by Ali Wick. And the third is a kind of note forward with women in science as a potential area and an opportunity where women can grow. And we have guests who will reflect on that, moderated by Fida Kanan. But before I hand the floor and the microphone to our lovely participants, I'd like, just on behalf of the organizing committee, to thank all of those who worked really hard to make this symposium happen. I would like first to extend a sincere thanks to Dean Nadia Sheikh, who was guiding and supporting the conference or the symposium all along with all the resources at her hand. Her dedicated staff, particularly I want to thank Karma Jarudi, who dealt with all the details. Also, Tamara Matouk, who produced the video that was at the opening. And I also want to thank Fida Kanan and Charlotte Karam for helping the organizing committee in their work. And all the participants who joined us with such short notice to share their work and reflections on their work. So again, I welcome you all and invite our first panelists to the floor. Thank you.
So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to dive right in to stay on point. My name is Charlotte Karam, and the first panel is really drawing on the foundational institutional programs here at AUB. So we are going to be discussing or talking about together AUB faculty, staff, students, and how the various initiatives around gender equity in Title IX and some of the challenges and opportunities that we see fit in developing more foundational or further developing foundational institutional programs to address discrimination and sexual harassment or harassment in general. I'm going to dive right in, and as I speak to each of our panelists, I will be doing a short introduction. So I think the first question goes to Ms. Trudy Hodges from the Equity and Title IX Coordinator and Equity Title IX Office, under the President's Office. So Trudy, why equity and Title IX, and what exactly is Title IX, and what's your role there?
Okay, this is working. Okay, I'm just going to flip and answer the last part to get this out of the way. My primary role is to organize AUB's efforts to ensure a safe and non-discriminatory environment on campus. And as a priority, we respond to incidents that are actually reported, and then we also work on training and awareness activities and oversight of student activities, oversee formal panel investigations. That's the core of my role. Now, why equity in Title IX at AUB? Well, equity is one of our core principles, and I think it's something that reflects our community values. We've also obligated ourselves, committed to this in policy, to creating a safe and non-discriminatory campus. At the same time, we know from a body of research about the prevalence of discrimination and harassment in higher education. We know the impact that it has on individuals and institutions, so it's important that we work on these issues. We also know that gender diversity improves performance on teams, organizations across the board, and particularly gender diversity in leadership. So finally, although I'd like to think we just work on these things because it's the right thing to do, and I think that is part of the reason we're working so hard on these issues with the President's support, but we work on it because it's a compliance issue as well. So,
very good, thank you. Dr. Brigitte Khoury, who is an associate professor of psychiatry in the Faculty of Medicine. So Trudy briefly mentioned the working group, and I want to delve deeper into the idea of the policy working group. And you've been working on these issues for nearly 2 decades at AUB. And President Khoury has placed as one of his priorities to work around gender equity in Title IX. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the policy working group that you chaired?
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. As Charlotte mentioned, we've been working on this since actually the year 2000, where the first committee was put under President Waterbury that put the first policies and procedures against harassment and discrimination. That was reviewed in 2009. There was another committee that reviewed it under President Dorman. And now in 2016, President Khoury appointed this task force. So the task force is actually made of students. The representative of students, actually Patrick, is sitting on the panel with us, faculty and staff. And we have worked for 1 year, reviewed all the policies and the procedures, and submitted the report to President Khoury. Now, the main recommendations that were made, one is to have a group of deputy Title IX, and we'll talk about it further, who are trained to help and support the Title IX office. If some of you have read in the policies, the word of ombuds keeps getting repeated, and an ombuds office. And this is something that we also have recommended to reactivate the recruitment of a part-time or full-time ombudsperson. And then, of course, at the end, establishing a permanent Equity in Title IX Council, which will support the Title IX office as well as the President and be as an advisory body. So these are some of the recommendations we made. But one thing I would like to really point is that AUB really is a pioneer in Lebanon and in the region for such work. We are the first university in the region to have had such policies and procedures. Our policies and procedures have actually inspired a parliament member to carry it further into parliament to apply this in the labor law in Lebanon. I don't know if some of you know, because harassment isn't mentioned in labor law. So this is really the impact that AUB has on a national and regional level. So it's not only changing and improving lives at AUB, but it's really extending further than that.
Wonderful, thank you, Brigitte. Trudy, if I could go back to you, and really if we reflect a little bit further, Brigitte started talking about the impact. So can you tell us about some of the impact of the work that you've been doing over the last 2 years?
I want to do that. I want to back up just a minute, though, because I was supposed to tell you what Title IX is in case someone doesn't on campus yet know what Title IX is. Basically, AUB has a very robust non-discrimination framework, as Brigitte mentioned. Our policies protect you against all those characteristics. And so for a university in Lebanon or the region, this is extremely robust. Title IX gives additional protections. It's U.S. gender equity legislation that prohibits sex discrimination in U.S. federally funded education. And it's not a women's rights law, but it's considered the most significant piece of legislation for women in terms of their access to education and participation in education. So I just wanted to mention that before we move on to some of the things that we've been able to do. So 2 years ago, I think there wasn't really awareness on campus, and thanks to the support of the President, he's made this a critical initiative and given some dedicated programming funds for it, and made training mandatory, and that's just hugely significant when the president says, this is important, you have to do it. And so based on that, in collaboration with HR, we initiated in-person training sessions, 2-hour sessions. We've now trained, let's see what the latest statistic is, 85% of all professional managers on campus have been trained. 60% of all other staff on campus have been trained. Those efforts are ongoing. So we've also...
That's quite remarkable, 85%.
I think so, and really that's thanks to, that Samar Diab, HR, we've collaborated with them. I think what's also interesting, we're the first ones to have policies. I bet we're the first university in the world to train staff in Arabic. So, and again, that's HR, Zina Tomi and Dr. Georges Bitar, who have trained some of the employees who, could not grasp these concepts in English and Arabic. So I think that's also quite remarkable. The medical center has also recently initiated, they modified the training for their audience, and so they're also starting this training. By the beginning of next summer, I think everyone on campus, all the staff will have taken this training.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about the Deputy Network and the Title IX Deputy Network?
Yeah. So the Title IX Deputy Network was actually selected by all the deans. It represents faculty from all the schools, as well as staff from most of the departments, major departments. Last May, we had a 3-day training for 55 people on campus, faculty and staff. Among them, 15 are deputies, and the rest will serve as panel members, so you see them behind me. As you know, whenever there's a complaint, there would be an investigation, and panel members need to be selected, and it is mandatory for them to be trained. So we had a trainer who came from the US and trained for 3 days. The interest, and many of you actually are here, so the interest was incredible. And the support of the deans, I think, is essential, and of the directors and administrators. And that's very important to mention. Now, the other thing is that these are all full-time faculty and staff. So they're doing, in addition to their 100% job, they're doing that. And as I say, it's always a work of love. So everybody was willing to put in the extra time and effort in order to serve AUB and to make it a better place.
Thank you. What about the online activity that's been happening? Would you speak to a little bit about online?
Yeah, exactly. Do you have that slide up there? Okay, so we also, as a complement to the in-person training, we knew that if we're going to scale up this awareness on campus, we'd have to do something online. We launched online training for students in March. 89% of students completed the training, which I honestly think is remarkable. They didn't all do it willingly, but in the end, 89% of them did it, so I think that's great. We've also launched a similar platform for faculty and staff. Faculty, they just recently received actually the invitation to do the training, and staff, the staff training is being piloted by the CFO Drew Wickens with his staff, because actually there's compliance courses, there's about 70 courses in the platform that go beyond just the Title IX, so everyone will be required to do the Title IX. There's additional compliance courses that are appropriate for depending on where you're working. So we're using the online training as a complement to the in-person. The final thing I really want to mention is we launched an online platform for reporting, Ethics Point. It's used by a lot of major universities in the States. We're piloting just for harassment and discrimination right now, and yes, I'm receiving reports through Ethics Point.
So now I want to move to student perspective, reminds us of... Hello? Okay. To the student perspective, I'd like to introduce 2 fantastic students that really have been involved in a number of initiatives. Alison Finn, who is a graduate student in sociology and the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, and Patrick Haddad, who is a graduate student in the English literature, also at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. And so, some of you have, or Patrick, just moved. We're happy to welcome you into graduate programs. He was an undergraduate student previously. And Alison's worked with undergraduate and graduate students both. So how have students been involved, and what is the impact of this type of work on students at AUB?
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Students have been involved in this work for quite a long time through clubs, there's faculties, as well as individual efforts. I'll speak a little bit more specifically to the work of the Title IX Student Action Committee. I work with Trudy as the graduate assistant for the Equity and Title IX office, and Patrick and I and a number of other students engaged in these issues founded the Title IX Student Action Committee last fall. So our mandate is, from a student perspective, to tackle issues of gender-based harassment and gender-based and sexual harassment and discrimination, specifically through awareness, advocacy, and action efforts on campus, also supporting the existing initiatives of the Title IX office, but as well, something that's a bit unique to the committee as opposed to student groups is really serving as a student voice to the administration and to the office and translating the impact of the policies and the practices to what students face on the ground. I'm really proud of the work that we've done and who's involved as well. We have undergraduates and graduate students. Last year we had students from 4 or 5 different countries. We had all the faculties represented, nurses, engineers, students in the humanities. So really cutting across campus to speak to the diversity of experiences. And I just want to share a personal reflection about why this is important. I started with the AUB community last fall, so I was new in doing this work and diving into working with students on campus. And I really saw the reality on the grounds for students across the boards. I expected what I saw in terms of verbal, physical harassment, comments about female students' appearance, maybe inappropriate comments in class, but it really goes far beyond that and intersects with sex and gender as well as the other protected categories you saw above. LGBTQ students face threats of their sexuality being exposed publicly. There is an incredible amount of online harassment, threatening messages via WhatsApp and Facebook, etc. Students of different nationalities are told by professors that they're stupid or they won't succeed in academic or academic work, research, etc. There's threats of retaliation for reporting. So part of the work is really to share this with the office because students are often afraid to go themselves.
And actually, during the first meetings of the Student Action Committee, we realized that the first obstacle was the lack of students' awareness to their rights, their resources, and how they can get help. As a result, we actually coordinated a multifaceted, student-oriented awareness campaign across the campus, in many occasions in partnership with KIP and several other student organizations. And these campaigns were focusing on, one, letting students know exactly how they can get help, and two, actually what is Title IX, what policies protect them. Many of our initiatives were also focusing on redoing the Title IX website and actually bringing these resources to students, making them more accessible to students. So the Title IX website got redone, and now Title IX is accessible on AUB Mobile, the mobile application. And physically, actually, we did a poster campaign several times over around the campus, and that was in an effort to making these resources more accessible to students. In all of these initiatives, I believe it was students, undergrads and grads, who were organizing them. For the most part, I believe students now feel more safe due to these measures, and they have been motivated to further this conversation to what we need.
Another big part of our mandates that we realized after we started tackling the awareness is that we as students need to increase our own capacity to tackle these issues because the Office of Equity and Title IX is just one person. Even with the deputies, they have many responsibilities. So we designed and implemented a training program for ourselves, for new community members, as a pilot, and we hope to be able to expand it to other students on campus. This includes information on AUB policies, how to report, what to do as a bystander if you see harassment or discrimination, as well as digital security. Again, cyber harassment is a huge concern for students, a huge reality. We coordinated a training on bystander intervention for about 50 students last semester, but it's really just the beginning. Do you want to speak to student input?
Yes, actually, Title IX has a constituency, as we all know, of 14,000 people, and more than half of that is definitely students. So student input in these administrative policies and practices is definitely essential in making sure these policies and practices protect who they need to protect. Now, if we neglect to open up to an ongoing conversation with the wider student body, we miss out on an opportunity to provide student voices to the administration on what students need. The common complaints that students have but do not report, and other areas where further training is definitely necessary. This is where my own work as a student who participated in the policy working group comes in. I hope to accomplish a task of providing an insight into the research, the resources students need. And as part of the Student Action Committee, we try to continue this discussion into the measures we can take to make the campus safer.
And briefly, just to answer the second part of your question of what has the impact of this work been on students, and I would also add on the administration, I think the Action Committee has been a fantastic example of students and the administration partnering on critical issues in a way that I hope to see echoed across campus. In terms of how the impact on the office, I can say from my own experience that the Title IX office now has a better understanding of students' realities of harassment and discrimination, as well as their experience of reporting. So we've been able to streamline that process and work out the kinks a little bit. And for students, we know now that Title IX exists and that we have rights and resources to use and that we're protected, but that is really just the baseline level. Now we're at a place where, with increased resources, we can really do more of not only addressing but preventing issues in the future.
Thank you. So, speaking to this greater awareness, and certainly you must be seeing more complaints, and you spoke, what types of complaints?
So most of the reports, historically and this year, are sex-based discrimination or harassment. For this year, I think 81% of the reports are either sex-based discrimination or sexual harassment of one form. Incident reports are up. They tripled from 17 last year to 52 this year. So clearly there is greater awareness, and clearly people feel more comfortable to come forward. Now, before we get too excited and think our work is done, when the expert was here to train us in May, he was asked the question, well, how many should we have? Because there's not really the statistics out there for you just to say how many reports we had. He said in his opinion, given the size and diversity and the fact that we also have a medical center, he would expect that we would have hundreds of reports annually. So we know that there's still much more work to be done. Student reports are also up from 17 to 52. So we know that the pattern is strongly male-to-female sexual harassment, but not exclusively.
Thank you. So, there's so much to talk about, and one thing that I asked before we came to the session was I asked each panelist to really reflect on the challenges and to identify specific needs going forward. So if they were to boil it down to, there are many things that need to be done, and although we recognize that this is quite a large challenge, I asked them to really reflect on key challenges. They sent a list of key challenges. Here we've listed them for you. And so what I'm going to do now is turn to each of the panelists and ask them to really focus in on what is needed. And so maybe we can start with Ali.
This is my favorite question. So Trudy just mentioned that our reports have increased, and based on the training of the deputies and expanded awareness and outreach efforts, I expect and hope that they will continue to increase to the hundreds. That's what we should have at an institution of this size with a medical center. But ironically, as the number of reports increase, the ability and the capacity of the office to address all of the other needs of students, visitors, staff, faculty decreases, because our biggest resource is time, right? So that's a huge challenge that I see, particularly in relation to all aspects of campus life for students, and I would like us to have more resources in order to better address, to change the elements of campus culture that make life at AUB, frankly, difficult and unsafe for women, for people who don't conform to gender norms, for students coming from outside of Beirut who don't have the same network and resources and support systems on campus. The most difficult and the most serious cases that students and other community members face are when multiple of those protected categories are targeted in harassment and discrimination. So not just gender and sex, but religion or citizenship status, ethnicity, race, etc. And in order to address this challenge, we need far more than just reporting and reporting structures. That's just one tool, right? So what do we need? How could we change, to answer the fun part of your question? I think we need more safe spaces on campus, particularly for students, but also staff and faculty. Many peer institutions have women's centers, for example, have larger counseling centers, more confidential resources, and that would go a long way to supporting students through these issues. We also need more training for staff and students as well. So the deputies are a great first step, but all faculty and many managerial staff are mandatory reporters. That means if they hear or see or learn about harassment and discrimination, they have to report it, and they should also all be trained on the same topics in order to support students and others when they go to them for help. And we need training that moves beyond how to report. So let's talk to professors about creating inclusive syllabi that have more voices of female scholars, more voices of scholars of color, of non-Western scholars. Let's include representation in this as well. Again, not just reporting. And let's train student leaders, club presidents, dorm staff, academic advisors about bystander intervention, about digital security. Again, really moving beyond just what to do in the moment of crisis, but what we can do throughout a student and an AUB community member's experience to improve it.
Yeah, well, because of the recent efforts by the administration in protecting against discrimination, I believe students are now much more empowered to discuss what further measures we need in ensuring a safer and more just campus. Unfortunately, though, there is an ongoing lack of trust in the reporting process, its outcomes, its fears of, and obviously an accompanying fear of personal and political retaliation. For these reasons, students often opt not to report discrimination. Now, a lot of that is an issue of transparency. Obviously, our efforts have benefited a lot from the support and the stance of many people in the administration, and Ali and I know that reporting can lead to results, but students don't see that because results cannot be announced due to a confidentiality. From our conversation with our peers, I believe that students wish to see an administration that is proactive in tackling systemic discrimination. In few words, we need to become the first institution in the Middle East that goes out of its way to protect marginalized, vulnerable student groups, and not just on paper, but also in practice. A university that promotes inclusive events, and definitely an institution that takes the first steps in preventing discriminatory or harassing content in classrooms, events, and the cyberspace in favor of a balanced dialogue in safer settings.
Yeah. So I'm going to make one sentence about resources, and then I'm going to move on to something else. Of course, the program needs the support commensurate with the size and diversity of the campus, with the fact that reports are increasing. I think I want to say something else, that while there are a lot of challenges, at the same time, I think that we have an opportunity to do something at AUB that maybe campuses in the States don't have the luxury to do. We have a different, and of course we will always have the ethical and legal obligation to respond to incidents, and we have compliance requirements beyond that. But I think we have an opportunity here in building this program to do something interesting. We don't have the same context. We don't have the fraternity culture. We don't have the commercialized sort of athletics program. I mean, we have a different context. We are a community. And And I think that given that, there's an opportunity to build something, an endogenous program, something that is from within the local context, something where students, faculty, and staff actually inform what they think equity should look like quantitatively and qualitatively. Of course, a program where we collaborate, and a program where we work with faculty who are basically experts in issues that overlap or intersect, whether it's sociology, psychology, gender studies, medicine, public health, ethics, just to name a few. And definitely we want it to be a program where student engagement is mission critical. For me, this is just so important. I think that if we take this opportunity that we have, we can build something that is different and extremely responsive to our community, and will have greater impact in terms of cultural shift.
When we first started this work, I had a faculty member come over to me and say, "We don't have sexual harassment at AUB. And maybe we have one case every few years." Well, clearly the numbers have shown us otherwise. Doing this work has already broken a lot of taboos, a lot of denial that people have. Most important, these are actually among the main sources of underreporting at AUB. Having the shame of coming forward, having also the victims re-victimized, accusing the students, why was she wearing a short skirt? Why did she, So all these things, these are ideas and thoughts that need to change. And it is our responsibility at AUB, as staff, faculty, and students, to actually change that and make AUB a safer place. The last word I want to say, we're having a climate survey that will be launched in October, and it was skip funded, thanks to Dr. Charlotte Karam. This will really give us a true idea what students encounter, what they think, what they feel, and how we can save them and how we can protect them the best that we can. As I always say, and I say it to all the panels, that if you don't do it in front of your parents, or your spouse and partner, or your kids, please don't do it at AUB. Thank you.
So with that, we'd like to thank you for being with us on the first panel, and we do have a video, but I think we're out of time. Do we have it set up, the video? Okay, great. So we'll end with the video.
To achieve our highest potential through university life, it's important to have an open, inclusive, and tolerant environment.
I thought Title IX would be a great platform for me to actually take action.
Any type of discrimination is not acceptable, especially in this university.
Research proves there is a direct link. Having more women in political office means having more policies that are fair, both for gender equity and for social equity.
Transforming education is central to social and political transformation more broadly. And to get to social transformation, you start with the change at the level of ideas, at the level of perceptions. And this is where AUB, as an educational institution, as a liberal arts college, can play a very significant role.
I would just like to point out that that video was produced under the directorship of Dima Jamali for the Strategic Partnership Initiative, which was launched under President Khouri. And with that, we conclude the first panel, and we ask the second panel to join. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexis Wick. I teach in the History Department here at AUB, the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. And I was a member of the task force on the lives and careers of women faculty at AUB. My role here today is to introduce and moderate this wonderful second panel, which will present to you all a few of the major findings of this task force on the lives and careers of women faculty at AUB. We will begin with Professor Huda Zreh, Emeritus Professor of Public Health and co-chair of the task force, who will speak to the methodological dimensions of the task force as a whole. Please.
Thank you, Ali. I would like to start the presentation on the task force by sharing with you the members of the task force. Whoops. Okay. Now, this task force was appointed by the President in December 2015, and he asked both Waidal Harithi and myself to co-chair the task force. We had with us 15 other members, 11 faculty members, junior and senior, women and men from all faculties. We also had 3 senior staff with us and 1 supportive research associate. Sorry, we can't go through the names because of the time limitation, but there will be opportunity when the report is shared, I think soon, inshallah. The charge of President Fadlo Khouri was comprehensive in its concern for gender equity among faculty and sensitive to the realities of women's lives, particularly in our region. He asked us about gender discrepancies in well-being, in income, in leadership, in recruitment, and in opportunities for academic achievement. He also asked us about perceptions of the work-family balance, all this in seeking the opportunities to improve women's lives and careers at AUB. Oops, this came out of sequence. How does this happen? Okay, okay. The task force activities mainly occurred in 2016, and according to the charge of the President, we first delineated 2 themes on which the task force would focus. Theme A, professional status and career trajectories, and Theme B, work and family, personal life balance. The task force formed 4 working groups, 3 for Theme A, and they focused on representation and leadership, the first working group, recruitment and advancement, the second working group, and salaries and benefits, the third working group. The 4th working group was concerned with Theme B, work and family, personal life balance. Every member of the task force was an active participant in one of these working groups. So it was a group work. And the core work occurred in the working groups to define conceptually clear metrics. How do we represent the issues that we are dealing with? To compile data in order that we can present rigorous findings on which to make recommendations. Besides the working groups, the task force also had 10 meetings during the year in which we debated, dialogued, and thought about our methods and our results. We organized 3 community meetings throughout the year to open for input from the AUB community at large, and the co-chairs had regular communication with the President and meetings as needed. Just to give you an idea in terms of the methods in data collection, this is Theme B, we should get Theme A first. Sorry. Okay. In data collection, Theme A, that dealt with professional status and trajectories, was able to use data from central AUB data systems, particularly from the Human Resources Department on campus, and also Office of the Provost and other offices. We also, or the working groups, relied also on faculty and departmental data whenever that was available. We would like to thank all these units at this point for their cooperation. Now, it was a challenging task to locate data for the identified metrics. Multiple systems existed, which had inconsistencies between them. Data at times had to be compiled by hand from many sources, and some significant data was not available. I will give us an example. Data on recruitment was very poor, our record of recruitment. Let's see what we will get. Okay. On Theme B, perceptions of balance, The data was collected through first a quantitative survey, an online survey of a random sample that yielded 226 male and female faculty members. And the second was a qualitative study which sought more in-depth information from 4 focus groups with female faculty volunteers. Now, the challenges existed also for this working group, particularly in terms of the iterations we had to go through on the questionnaire to achieve conceptually clear and workable instrument. Also, the time it took for IRB clearance for both these studies. 3, the response rate, which came out after many trials to 37%. The only discrepancy, however, from overall faculty characteristics of our sample was that proportionally more women than men responded. Now, this was corrected for by statistically rigorous weighted analysis. Finally, in terms of the findings, you will hear next a review of the multiple view of the metrics which we have collected, showing female-male differentials, variations by faculty, variations by professorial rank, and whenever possible, we have time trends of 5 years and 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Huda. And now we'll hear from Trudy Hodges, the Equity Title IX Coordinator and also a member of the task force, of course, who will speak on the question of representation and leadership.
Okay. Okay. I worked with Dr. Soha Kanj and Dr. Diana Jalouk on the representation, leadership, and committee board membership. Basically, our subgroup, the overarching question was, what's the current status of women among professorial faculty and in decision-making roles, and what, if any, progress has been made over time? So we got data for 15 years from HR. This was the most complete data that we had. The other data had to be sourced from different places and was not standardized. But the HR data we got for 15 years was complete. In 2001, there were 321 faculty. 25% were women. In 2016, the faculty, and this is professorial faculty full-time, had just slightly more than doubled to 644. The percentage of women, 28%. So the numbers, if you look at the numbers, here they are. I know there's a 40% number that floats around in terms of women faculty at AUB. That includes part-time and all levels of appointments, instructors, senior lecturers, lecturers. So the next question that we wanted to ask was, so has there been, so now we know there's been, some modest progress. Well, where have women fared better and where have they fared less well? So basically, we looked at the relative increase in gender not only by faculty. In some cases, we went to the level of discipline clusters. So for example, in FAS, we looked at social sciences, humanities, and sciences, because these disciplines can actually be very dissimilar and can have very different results. And we didn't want these results to blend and basically say, well, they're doing just fine, when in fact there were problems. So what we found out is that if we look at the net relative increase over time between 2001 and 2016, women to men, the factor is more than 1-to-1 in FAS social sciences, FAFS, FAH, and architecture and design. Where did women fare less well? In FAS sciences, engineering, FM, OSB, and humanities. So what's really critical to remember is that over time, over this 15 years, 83% of the relative increase in the faculty came in these 5 sectors, where you actually had men, the relative increase of men to women was more than 1-to-1, in some cases 7.3-to-1. So overall, over the period, the relative increase of full-time professorial male faculty, 220 to 103 women. Fine. So the next question we said, in terms of the expansion of the faculty, no. So then we said, let's zoom back out. Let's look, okay, by professorial rank, are women at least in the pipeline? So, and how do we compare to peer institutions? So assistant and associate professor, and this is 2015-16, the numbers have not been updated, it's 32%. At the full professor level, 21%. We compare an overall 28%. If you compare that to a comparator group that we got from the Enrollment and Statistics and Management unit, you actually can see that at every level we're significantly below the peer group institution. If you really want to understand the numbers, though, you need to go to the faculty level and the discipline to see really where, what's leading into these totals. Okay. So the next thing we wanted to look at, and I think that you would find interesting, is basically, so what is, by faculty, and this is 2015-16, when we ended the task force work, more or less, what is the percentage of professorial faculty? So you can see it ranges from 21% in Faculty of Engineering and Architecture and Design to 92% in HSON. Remember, that's 28% overall for AUB. So the next step we wanted to do was compare this. How does this compare to women's participation in leadership at the faculty level? Okay. So you can see that in engineering, for example, 13% compared to 21% participation. It's roughly comparable in OSB to the average. And I know that these numbers may have changed significantly, so we're looking forward to all of them being updated by the sort of permanent body that on an ongoing basis will update these. So the final slide I have, I really don't have a lot of slides. These are really just highlights, and if you want, there's a lot of interesting data in the report and a lot of detail. The final slide I have, we looked at senior leadership and elected governance. We looked at it over time. I'm just going to give you a snapshot of really where we're at 2015-16. So at the Board of Trustees level, it's 15% female representation. This is voting membership. It really has been quite stable over time. In senior administrative leadership, there have been some gains over time. It's now 20%. It was about 7%, I think, in 2000. At the faculty level, academic leadership is 22%. Again, there's been some gains over time. And in the Senate, it's 17%. I think actually now the current percentage has gone up a bit because there were 3 senators elected in FAS, female senators. There are several faculties, though, that don't have any women's representation in the Senate. I think FAS, FEA, SFEA, and HSON. Okay, so these are just a few highlights. As I said, if you want to see a lot more detail, you can go into the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Next, I'd like to invite to the podium Dr. Evelyn Hitri, Associate Professor in Clinical Emergency Medicine and Chairperson of the Department of Emergency Medicine here at AUBMC, and a member of the task force also.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to be talking about the work group that Dr. Sharaf Karam Patrachouri and I worked on, which was really looking at recruitment, promotion, and advancement of faculty at AUB. So again, lots of limitations in terms of, or not limitations, but challenges in terms of getting the data because it existed and housed in many different areas and needed to be gathered. But ultimately, we came up with some good metrics. So the first question that we wanted to ask ourselves, and you saw the numbers and the proportions of women within the faculty body. So was it an issue of recruitment? Were we not making offers to women proportionately to men? So this data, believe it or not, does not exist in HR in our institution. We had to pull it from the individual faculties. And 4 of the faculties gave us that data in a timely fashion for us to look at the numbers. And in half of those 4, only a quarter of the offers were being made to women. And in one of them, only 6% of the actual offers were accepted by women. So not only is it that we weren't making necessarily offers in proportional and equal numbers, but for whatever reason, which we did not have time to look into, and we don't have records of why these offers were being declined, but people weren't rushing, women weren't rushing to join in some of the faculties. So another important issue is, what was the hiring rank, and why is this important? So as many of you know, in academic institutions like ours, the governance and the empowerment lies in the professorial ranked faculty. So it's important to know where women are. Are they within the professorial ranked faculty, or are they in the non-professorial? And what's the difference? The non-professorial cannot vote and are not eligible for a lot of the governance structure of the institution. So we looked over 10 years, we pulled from HR the records of hiring and what the initial rank on hiring was. And what we found was 73% of men were hired into professorial ranked positions compared to 47% of women. So of course, this is reflected in the composition. This is actual composition of the faculty body. 8% of men hold non-professorial ranks compared to 35% of women. So another important thing that we looked at is promotion. So were women actually getting promoted successfully compared to men? And the good news there, yes, when women actually went up for promotion, 78% women compared to 80% of men got successfully promoted. Where we found the difference is in the percentage of women who were getting promoted within 6 years, so early. So if you look at, this is assistant professor, and the green is women who got promoted within 6 years. 62% of women got promoted within 6 years, so early, compared to 75% of men. And then from associate to full, 56 compared to 65. Again, why is this important? It's important because we all know that the gender gap increases as you go up the ladder. And this definitely perpetuates the problem when you have more men getting promoted earlier. And data, we didn't look at why this existed in our institution, but it's important to know that the literature out there really attributes this mainly to the less accessibility of formal and informal mentorship and networking opportunities for female faculty compared to men. Looking at professional support as certainly and development, and it feeds into advancement of women. These didn't line up well, but basically we looked at sabbatical leave over the past 10 years. And what we found, there was only a disproportionate lower number of women compared to men in 2 of the faculty. The rest, we did not find a significant difference. Finally, the good news is in terms of grants, women compared to men were able to attract grants equally, both in number and in terms of value. Things that we did not look at that other institutions do look at when they're looking at gender equity metrics, and we did not look at because it was very difficult to pull the data. It was not housed systematically and not housed in a way that was reliable, was space, RA/GA support, equipment, and service and teaching load, which all impact the ability to advance, and where there's a lot of literature supporting that women do carry a disproportionately heavier load of those. So that's all. Thank you.
Finally, I'd like to invite to the podium Dr. Monique Shaya, Professor of Epidemiology, and who will, a member of the task force, who will speak to us and present a few of the recommendations on the team that I had the pleasure of participating in, work-life balance.
Thank you, Ali. So the task force consisted of myself, Dr. Alan Shhade, Alexis Wick, Dr. Naila Ael, Dr. Nohad Doumit, and that's it. So work-life balance, what is this work-life balance? So this is really an important concept in academia, where the burden of work actually spills over to family and personal life. And research shows that an imbalance in work lives could lead to create dissatisfaction, it could lead to or affect negatively mental health, and among women in academia, actually, it is actually a push outside academia. So what we did is we looked at the literature and knowing well the context, we built a framework to understand the status of men and women in terms of one, working life, working characteristic, which comprise of working characteristic work environment, their personal life in terms of caregiving responsibility, social, personal activity, and their involvement in public and community services, looking how they perceive objectively and subjectively this work-life balance, and ultimately we wanted to see how this affect on their well-being, specifically on the psychological health. And what we did, as Dr. Zere mentioned, we did an online survey of 228 full-time professorial and non-professorial male and female faculty, and because we had some oversampling and higher response from women faculty, we did actually some weighing and the analysis to have really rigorous data. And so starting with the working life, we had a 10 statement on aspect of the work at AUB in terms of how the faculty perceive their work in the department, in the faculty, and AUB at large. Overall, there is a positive feeling about being at AUB, working at AUB. However, there were noticeable differences by rank, when we stratify by rank and by faculty. But we wanted to show some particular aspect of work life that deserve actually some attention. And these are one is the faculty agreeing that department provides effective mentoring. And actually, this reflects a lack of mentoring at the department level, where only 14% of the females said that strongly agree that department provide effective mentoring, compared to 20% of the male. Whether department is supportive of success of women, again, a higher proportion among females, a lower proportion among the female reported that, compared to 46% of the male, and a higher proportion of female reporting that AUB should support this work-life balance. So coming to personal life, and personal life is about caregiving responsibility, it's about social and personal activity, and we know that the context of Lebanon, where we are very much involved in social responsibility and to responsibility actually beyond work and beyond the nuclear family, and a high proportion of the female faculty, or male and female, have caregiving responsibility for children less than 3, children 3 to 18, and elderly. Actually, 1 in 10 of the faculty member, they take care of elderly people. There are a lot of involvement in social and personal activity, 53%, more than half. And we know that, we have noticed that women are much more involved in the caregiving, and they are more involved in social and personal activity. However, when we ask them about some coping strategy and some leisure activity that they are involved in as part of their social activity, only a small proportion of faculty members were involved in, let's say, doing sports in the past month, and this is much lower in the female, and this is significantly lower among the female, 18 versus 24 among the male. And whether they are engaged in public and community service, what we mean by that, if they are member of, on the board of an NGO, a university, a school, or something similar like this, again, this is a low proportion of women and men who are involved in community service or public service. So when we come to the real, the real interest, which is the work-life balance, I think this is a little bit small, but I'll tell you that what we used is we used the scale, and we asked faculty member to rate from 0 to 10 how much they feel that their work life is balanced. So 0 is there's no balance at all, and 10 is very well balanced. And actually, this is what the results show, is that we have a moderate average work-life balance, slightly better for males, 4.8 versus 5, with similar variability. And we noted that the lowest score on work-life balance is for associate professor, female associate professor. But there was also more interesting question about how they rank their life compared to their work. And many faculty members actually, they feel that, or they reported that family life is secondary to work, more than 50%. And when we asked them if they missed travel or conferences due to life obligation in the past 2 years, 38% of the faculty of female reported that, compared to 24%, and this is statistically higher. While when we ask them if they miss life obligation due to work responsibility, 68% they actually miss something related to their family life and personal life for work. And this is actually very alarming. Now, this is my outcome, and the outcome is psychological health. And we had a list of symptoms of negative and some positive symptoms, such as feeling exhaustion, burnout, nervous, stress, not feeling on top of things, feeling guilty of not being able to do much, unable to cope with work, so on and so forth. So what we ended up finding is that the more than 80% actually have experienced at least one negative symptom. So one psychological symptom. And when we look closely at few of the symptoms, we were struck by three particular symptoms. One is the burnout, and this is often feeling burnout, because this is a response is on a Likert scale, like often, sometimes, rarely, or never. So often feeling burnout in the past months was reported by more than half of both males and females, higher among the males. Feeling nervous and stress overall is 44% of the faculty members survey, with much higher proportion among the female, more than 50%. And feeling on top of things, which is more of a positive symptom, only 20% of the female said that they felt on top of things compared to 30% of the males, and both of them are not actually very, good result for us. And when we try to understand what are the predictors or the factor associated with often feeling burnout, this is only one outcome that we chose. The multivariate analyses revealed that often feeling burnout is associated with being a female, a woman faculty, and having low work-life balance score. Now, this is for the quantitative. Now, for the qualitative study, we had focus group discussion with female faculty, full-time faculty, and this was more to explore how women actually think about work-life balance. And the main question that was posed is, how do you manage between your family, personal life, and your career? There was a lot of probes, and we had one overarching theme and three themes. The overarching theme was that the ability to manage lives and career is taken for granted, and all this comes at the expenses of your personal and family and social life. So it comes with money and has personal health and family social cost. And the first theme is female faculty. They feel overburdened by assignment. The female faculty need to be supported in managing their lives and career, and they do face challenges with work ethics. And I would like to add that we also collected data on experiencing or hearing about gender-based harassment. And what we found is that 24% of faculty, males and female, reported experiencing at least one type of harassment. It could be verbal or sexual. Sexual was low, but yet this is 24% and much higher among female faculty members. This is only a glimpse of the result. It's a very rich data set, and I hope that you will have a chance to read the report and get really what we collected data of. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. And now for the grand finale, tying everything together, Professor Huwaid Al-Harithi, co-chair of the task force, will present the major recommendations of the report.
Thank you, Ali. Again, the recommendations are many. The report submitted to the President over 30 recommendations, but I'm going to share with you the ones we've prioritized and felt that they need to be implemented first to kind of pave the way for everything to unfold. I'm going to try to link them to our themes, but there are some overall recommendations that came through most of the work that we did, and I'm highlighting three: to integrate gender opportunity and equity into strategic planning process. The university was undergoing the strategic planning, and we felt that this should be factored in. Establish a commission on the status of women, because we felt that a need for a more permanent, sustainable system to take care of collecting the data, updating it, analyzing it, following up on issues, and handling the changes on campus. Third, develop a gender opportunity and equity information system. Again, you've heard from my colleagues that one of the problems we faced was the absence of information or inconsistent information across the board, or information that is gender sensitive. So we feel that a system needs to be designed for collecting the information and making it readily available and consistent across the board. We had, against the major themes, some recommendations that I pulled some out of. On representation, for example, we recommend appointing women to leadership roles and to increase women representation in decision-making bodies. This is something that is already taking place, as I mentioned in my introduction, but we never get enough of. Second, to increase representation of women on search committees. We felt that part of the recruitment problem that was raised by my colleagues is the fact that there is a lack of awareness or absence of maybe representation of women on search committees, or offering them voices. In our community meetings, we've heard a lot from women who are in committees, but they don't feel that they can voice their opinions. So again, the environmental factors are extremely important. To develop a unified template that deans are requested to fill annually, to map the gender salary distribution across disciplines. Again, salary was one of the groups, the working groups that were part of this task force, who did not get the chance to present their findings today. But this was one of the main themes that we discussed and we made recommendations for. Benefits also, we have two recommendations. One has to do with HIP and some kind of adjustments and reform to discriminatory policies. I think already these have been addressed because we've been presenting to various bodies through the President's office, and these have already been tackled and some have already been corrected, for which we are grateful. Establishing a daycare and center, this was the most popular request we got as a task force in our community meetings, in our survey questionnaires, in our casual encounters with female faculty members. The need for a daycare on campus was really high on their wish list. Across the work-life balance, we also made two key recommendations: to reevaluate and expand the support system to help faculty members achieve better work-life balance, and to assume and to ensure that women faculty benefit from this support. The second is to take active steps to alleviate the high level of poor psychological well-being. Monique gave you quite an overview of the results we received, but we feel that we need systems in place to increase the support for women. Across all the themes, we have shared recommendations. One is to include gender equity in periodic evaluations. Again, in my introduction, I talked about not only awareness and empowerment, but accountability. And I think this is going to be an essential part to kind of ensure that gender equity is practiced. To put policies in place at department levels to ensure that all faculty members receive effective mentorship. You've heard from my colleagues that mentorship came up over and over again when we interviewed people in the questionnaires, in the community meetings, that most of the issues of concern revolved around mentorship. So again, this was something that is already addressed when we presented to the Board of Deans. Steps were already being discussed about improving mentorship for all faculty in general, but particularly for women faculty. Organize a university-wide comprehensive climate survey of faculty members. We felt that we didn't have the time to do it or the resources, but we feel that this is an essential next step next to the Commission for Women or the information system, that we need to really understand the context of the place. Also, maybe to conduct pilot climate assessment of problematic departments. The findings are clear that we cannot generalize across the campus, and that some departments are doing better than others, and there are inconsistent results. So it would help to conduct more focused studies for particular departments. Finally, to conduct climate assessment as well as institutional survey of the attitude of the academic leadership. Again, the decision makers, we need to know where they stand and how open they are to the transformative recommendations that need to unfold for improving gender equity on campus. These are, again, glimpses of the general and more dominant recommendations that President Khouri is already acting on. And I hope that you'll be able to read more of the full report to understand the context in which we all operate so that we can all become agents of change. Thank you.
Thank you all for your attention. And now on to the third panel for the day.
Director of Executive Education at the Alliance School of Business. It's a great pleasure to be moderating this session on women in science at this presidential symposium around women at AUB. In this panel, we will attempt to reveal some of the barriers hindering gender parity across the STEM faculty body at AUB and explore opportunities and acceleration strategies to close the gender gap. We will start with an introduction by Dr. Lama Musawi Haidar. Lama is an associate professor of management sciences and my AUB Stanford co-ambassador. She will be doing the introduction and then we will follow it with a panel discussion. So I'll leave the floor to Lama.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to thank the President for the opportunity to be here today. It is difficult to think of more appropriate forum to discuss the issue at hand, especially given the overarching implications of the leadership role AUB can play in this regard. A few years ago, researchers at Yale University published a study showing that physicists, chemists, and biologists are likely to view a young male scientist more favorably than a woman with the same qualifications. Presented with identical summaries of the accomplishments of two imaginary applicants, professors at 6 major research institutions were significantly more willing to offer the man a job. For too long, discriminatory stereotypes have prevented women and girls from having equal access to education in science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM. This denies women the opportunity to realize their full potential and deprive the world of the ingenuity and innovation of half the population. Success in STEM, far from being a matter of gender, is strongly influenced by a long-standing culture, a culture that teaches girls that math isn't cool, a culture in which female scientists are hired less frequently than men, earn less money, are allotted fewer resources, and promoted less often. Gender biases discourage women from even contemplating the prospects of pursuing careers, let alone in STEM. We at AUB have made great progress in many STEM areas. For example, in engineering, women's representation among professor positions has increased from 5% to 14% over the last 5 years. Also, in the last 5 years, the percentage of women in academic leadership has increased from 14% to 22%. Yet, barriers to equality remain, and more needs to be done to achieve true gender parity. For example, last year in the sciences, women made up 9% of the associate and 17% of the full professors. And in engineering, 5% of associate and 6% of full professors were women. Long since its inception, many decades ago, AUB has always been a place where innovation, discoveries, and pushing the very boundaries of what's possible happen. It was a beacon of hope, of liberation through education and economic opportunity, of true opportunity. Coupled with technology, a major liberating and democratizing force in modern societies, scientific and medical research have helped propel us to become the greatest source of knowledge creation, idea incubator, thought leadership, and hope generator in our region. This is not only our legacy, but also the path for our future. That this instigates our society to make the indispensable investments to continue being at the forefront of innovation for many, many years to come. Thus, we must ensure that women's participation in innovation is no longer the exception, but becomes rather the norm. We need to ensure that our children's aspirations aren't segregated into pink and blue, and that working families don't have to choose between taking care of a loved one and realizing their full potential. In STEM, diversity is critical to our success as scientists. Women and girls should have an equal opportunity to learn and grow. We stand stronger together. We stand stronger by bringing people together from a variety of perspectives. With the rise of a fourth industrial revolution, driven by the dramatizing force of technology, leveling the playing field for women in STEM is critical for a better world. Accordingly, we must ensure we are promoting and fostering a culture to support diversity. The development, recruitment, and support of our faculty provide the essential foundation of a great university. But if we are going to change our policies, we also have to change the way we see ourselves. We need to keep changing the attitude that raises our girls to be reserved and our boys to be assertive, that criticizes our daughters for speaking out and our sons for shedding a tear. I believe that economic opportunity made possible through robust and relevant education that places women at the forefront of well-paid jobs in the modern technology and information-driven economy is the real and long-term solution going forward. Today, we are witnessing a pivotal juncture where the success of female faculty in STEM is no longer driven by a tough swim against the current, but rather by an institutional commitment to diversity. The institutional initiatives and the remarkable efforts that President Khouri has started to foster diversity will set a leading example, will bring about cultural changes, and shape the future of our society for generations to come. One prime example of AUB's transformative mission in action is the AUB Stanford Women in Data Science Conference, WIDS, a long-term partnership with Stanford University that developed under the leadership of Dean Steve Harvey at the Olayan School of Business and targeted for the entire MENA region. With this partnership, AUB will be at the forefront of data science, a rapidly growing field that is redefining knowledge creation and a revolution that will sweep through academia, business, and government. AUB Stanford WID's success is a testament of how institutional support for female in STEM can exponentially propel our success. With this support, the groundbreaking success of WIDS amazed not only our local supporters, but also our fellow partners at Stanford. We had more than 600 attendees and were ranked first on social media with 28 million impressions. The event was live streaming in Dubai, Ramallah, Doha, Sharjah, and all around the globe. It reflects the power of having an institutional support structure aiming at gender equality. Today's event is an opportunity to reflect on how far we've come and why we have to keep going. Women in science at AUB have dedicated their lives to advancing the goals of this institution. They have endured decades of tumultuous and societal challenges and barriers, patriarchal societies, and lack of support. Yet, they were able to rise above all the noise and fulfill their dreams. They shattered the glass ceilings and spent sleepless nights and worked until their bones hurt to rise above the gender biases so that they may have life and have it more abundantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Lama.
I would like to turn it over to Ms. Fida Kanaan, Director of Executive Education Program at USB, and AUB Stanford WID's co-ambassador to get the panel started.
Thank you very much, Lama. Before we start our discussion today, I feel very lucky that we have an impressive, faculty here on our science panel. I would like to talk about the fourth industrial revolution that Lama touched on, because it does represent a different playing field that we know is going to be fusing physical, digital, and biological worlds. Is going to be redefining our jobs, the different disciplines, the industries, and the world economy. And we see it already. It's already blurring the lines between human and robots in so many ways. The key propellers of this revolution are no other than science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And the underrepresentation of women in STEM means that women will be hit the hardest, as our world leaders clearly highlighted during this year's World Economic Forum. As a leading educational institution, we do hold a fundamental responsibility here, because our impact is not only on our own body of faculty and staff, but also on all STEM disciplines and industries that our own female graduates will be joining and redefining. So addressing this underrepresentation now and accelerating its progress go beyond the typical fairness argument that we became very familiar with to become a required strategic imperative for AUB's success in this new world economy. So, I would like first to introduce our amazing panelists. I'll start with Dr. Fatima Abu Salim, right from the end, Associate Professor at the Department of Computer Science. She's the only computer science female faculty since I graduated AUB. She's Associate Editor also of Elsevier Journal of Parallel and Distributed Computing. Dr. Mariat Awad, she's Associate Professor in Computer Engineering. She did start her career in industry at IBM in the US, where she earned 11 patents and led numerous grants. She also published her own book on machine learning. If you guys haven't seen her Stanford Woods presentation, it's a must to see it. Dr. Najat Saliba, Professor of Chemistry in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. She founded and currently directs the Atmospheric and Analytical Laboratories, led the National Air Quality Research Unit, co-founded and currently directs the National Conservation Center, where she runs different eco-entrepreneurial activity. And if her face is familiar, you must have seen her at the Stars of Science show on TV. And Dr. Suha Khan Sharara, Professor of Internal Medicine and Infectious Diseases. She's the head of the division, the chairperson of the Infection Control Program. Her dedication to her patients led one of her patients to donate a conference room that was named in her honor. She's also the recipient of many prestigious awards, the latest being 2017 Abdul Hamid Shuman Award. And last but not least, Dr. Ghada Al-Hajj Flayhan. I did have a hard time summarizing her profile. She's a professor of medicine and a physician scientist. She founded different programs at AUB, including WHO Collaboration Center for Metabolic Bone Disorder. She's also the director of the Scholars in Health Research Program, SHARP, where she's focused on doing capacity building in her field. Her work is highly recognized at AUB at the national and international levels, where she founded and spearheaded different initiatives, task forces, as well as organizations in relations to osteoporosis and metabolic bone disorder. She's the recipient of numerous prestigious national and international awards, the most recent being Harvard School of Public Health 2017 Merit Award. So welcome, and thank you all for your time. So let's start with success stories. I want to quote what Lama had said. You shattered some ceilings, the glass ceilings that we all know. You swam against the stream, perhaps. Can you share with us some of the factors that got you to where you are today? I would like to start with Suha, if possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Fida, and I'd like to thank the President for really coming up with the idea of organizing the symposium, which had not been done before at AUB. And I was hoping to have more students in the audience so they can learn a bit from our experiences. I'd like to say that, so it's not easy to succeed in the world of academic medicine as a female doctor, especially if you have children and you want to try to balance your life as a mother and as a professional. But I think there are many things that have really contributed to my success. And one very important factor is you really need to be a good judge of character, and that is the most important when you pick your partner. Because if you don't pick a partner who's going to support you to reach the goals you had set for yourself, it's not going to be an easy mission. But there are also a lot of intrinsic attributes that are important to succeed. I think in order to succeed in any career, but more importantly in medicine, I would say you need to have the passion for what you do, and you need to be very compassionate and say that you put patients' interests and comfort before your own interest, and that is a key to succeed in the field of medicine. One very important thing I learned from my long-term friend Yusuf Hanoun when I was starting my internship at Duke. He told me, Suha, as a female doctor, you need to blow your own horn, because if you don't blow it yourself, no one else is going to blow it for you. And I've really kept his advice throughout my career. And I think that was really very important into, showing people around you that what you're doing is important, and what you've achieved has contributed very positively, not only to yourself, but to people around you. And also another very important factor is really you don't let negatives around you deter you from reaching your goals. I think this is something that I've learned long when I was in my residency, but I also applied it here when I first joined AUBMC. And I don't say that it was a very easy cruising sail when I arrived, but I always kept in mind that I'm not going to let bias or discrimination to deter me from reaching my goal. So you set your goal, you keep focused, you organize your thoughts, you organize your life, you organize your work, and that all had contributed, I think, to my success.
Okay, so hopefully when the institutional system is being set, we don't have to hear these biases and we can continue focusing at a faster speed. Najat?
Yes, of course, it was a support from home, first from my family and then from my husband. The second thing is passion, determination, and persistency. And I think the president mentioned this yesterday, that Marie Curie said it was not swift and it's not easy. The one thing that I would like to emphasize on is the openness and collaboration. I think the environment at AUB is very conducive to collaboration because we are a small university, and the Department of Arts and Science is very close to the Department of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. I was very successful to establish collaborations with most of the faculties at AUB, if not all of them. And with collaboration, there are like weekly or bi-weekly meetings, and basically you create a network, a forum where you can not only talk about science, but you can talk about different discussions that can open up through those meetings. And this is extremely important because that creates also a forum for mentorship as well. And I would like to, just end on this note with a personal story. I was visiting with one of my colleagues here, a municipality where we had to go and discuss with the head of the municipality if they can use our expertise to present, to see whether a local power plant is actually emitting harmful pollutants in the village. And when we were there, the head of the municipality was not making an eye contact with me. He kept talking to my male colleague all the time. And when we got out from the meeting, this person, my colleague, said, "I want to apologize for this meeting and for all my fellow males as well."
Najat, in our discussions before the panel today, you mentioned something about, that this is the era where the feminine character in science is being celebrated, interdisciplinary collaboration. Can you shed a little bit of light on how this helped you at AUB to succeed in founding the labs and the centers that you have?
Like I said, collaboration not only, it creates a forum of mentorship, it also widens your research scope. You would look at the crystal ball from different aspects because you're just discussing the same subject from different points of views. And I think women have, they have a share to show the crystal ball in a different way. And it's not easy. I would say that collaboration within, with different disciplines is not easy. It takes meetings after meetings to understand the other person's language, but it's something that definitely gives you a wider scope of research, and it makes your research more impactful.
Thank you. Ada?
So we've heard a lot of the same themes, and it's really a variation on that themes. I think it's intrinsic and extrinsic factors. I was blessed to come from a home with two wonderful parents with very successful career path, role models, mentors in multiple ways, strong work ethics, being blessed to belong to an institution as AUB in my formative years, having a very supportive husband who has really all the years supported me no matter what to reach my goals, and of course role models in the States. But I think the intrinsic properties of purpose, passion, and perseverance are key. I always knew I wanted to go to Harvard. I always knew I wanted to do my second best decision, an MPH. I always knew I wanted to come back to AUB. I loved being Lebanese. I love being at AUB, and there is nothing I get more exciting than presenting at international meeting and saying, she's coming from AUB. And I have to say, sex discrimination is there. A French colleague from French Search. This Lebanese woman is professor, and she speaks well. So I think there is nothing to be shy away. I am glad we came back. There were a lot of challenges coming back, but it was purpose. Passion, I love what I do. And awards and promotions and tenures, and Dr. Khoury would laugh at me, are not goals in themselves. They are the fruits of what we collect, the sweet desserts we collect on the way for what we love to do. A male colleague came to me 12 years ago and said, you're a full professor and you're one of the youngest. Why are you still here at 7:30? Well, it's not going to stop because I love what I do. My son with the latest award, who's a business, not a doctor, said, you get your award and you stop. But no, the passion is the love is what makes us being successful role models and mentors. And perseverance. And my first grant, big grant, was declined. And I had 2 other bad experiences. I've got several more grants, bigger and larger, because I persevered, I addressed comments, and I never took no for an answer. So I think it's extrinsic and intrinsic, and they feed back into each other. And I think I was lucky to be born in such a family, but it shouldn't be left to chance. I think we have the social responsibility of actually changing the social fabric. At AUB, it starts. We have the male colleagues, the student male colleagues and student body who are the fathers and the husbands of generations now and generations to come. And we are the leader. AUB is, nobody's more positioned than AUB to lead in this progressive affirmative action for gender equity. And of course, it's not easy. So I think it's really talking about these intrinsic and extrinsic characteristics that feed into each other. And I'm blessed to be at AUB. I'm glad to be at AUB, and I look forward to many more productive years. I think this initiative under the leadership of President Khoury is very inspiring, it's heartwarming, and it's wonderful to be with colleagues here. I think the devil in the details, they say. I think excellence is in the detail and success in the details, and we have a lot of work to do. And I look forward to seeing metrics and capturing on the main points here, and I hope they will be a steady, progressive monitoring of what we're talking about and setting our priorities and reaching there. Role models are there. We have them. They exist. We have a lot of positive stuff. We need to capitalize on it, not be shy being women. We shouldn't be taxed for being women. We shouldn't have to work 3 times as hard because we're women to get less. And we're talking about gender equity in promotion, recognition, support, and compensation. Recognizing women are different. And their needs are different, and this needs to be supported too. So I guess that's it.
Yes, thank you. So yes, lots of intrinsic, we heard a lot of intrinsic drivers that we, women, successful women in STEM had. Extrinsically, definitely the home institution, nicely the work institution and the AUB institutions. They're 2 very important institutions. For those of you who are intending to go into the STEM field, cherchez l'homme. So please, a very important decision in your career is the husband that you marry. I didn't say this. Sheryl Sandberg said it, and it's true. So I think we heard it from 2 panelists here, as well as having role models. I know Ghada's mother is a scientist herself, and she graduated from the Sorbonne, and the support of the family is extremely important at home, and it takes a mindset shift to be able to get that. So I'll flip the coin to the challenges, and it's important to try to recognize some of the challenges that we have to constructively be able to look at the challenges and provide recommendations for these challenges. So we did see the statistics that were presented by the task force. We want to zoom in a little bit more on the STEM field here, and if we can just if I can just ask you about some data from your own different faculties. What we're trying to look here is that I want to look at this as a pipeline, right? And we have a pipeline of a body of students with some sort of a gender representation, right? Male to female ratio. And then as you go into the assistant professorial level, how does that change as you move into associate and then professorial? How do these numbers change so that we can try to see the challenges? Why do we have this pipeline leakage going on, be it from the student representation numbers to the assistant, to the associate, and then finally to the professorial? So I would like first to ask Mariette on providing me her insight.
Sure. You know, they always speak about data, so we trust God, and God we trust, but everybody else has to bring his own data. So I have my data here. So for the faculty, for the Balloon Samad Faculty of Engineering and Architecture, our numbers are good at the student body. I mean, for the undergraduate, we're about 60%. For graduate, believe it or not, we're like over 100, slightly over 100% female and male. PhD level, we're about 80%. So that's really, if you talk about this pipeline, this is very good. But if we really now start looking at, you know, as you move up into your career, it gets to be lonely when you move up in the academic field at AUB. So our pipeline is more of a pyramid. The base is good. But then if you look at the faculty at large, we're about like 100 faculty members, 22. And, you know, the numbers that were presented before, I think a couple of years ago, the number was even much, much worse than that. So now we are about 22%, but we have the Department of Architecture and Graphic Design, which usually attracts a lot of female. So if we look at my own department, which is the ECE, we're like 8%. So this is a big disparity. Internationally, we've seen the numbers quoted by Lama and Trudy. The STEM field do have a problem in gender representation. But if we look at their base, the student base going up to more the professorial rank, they don't have this gap. So they're in their 30s, north, west of that, but over here, we're talking 80, 60, 90, and then back to 80. So definitely there's something that we're doing very good at the student level, attracting them, retaining them, but there's something that we're missing. We're not doing as good in terms of faculty and the promotion cycle.
So how about in computer science? How are we doing in computer science? And
so I'll begin with a probably description of how things have changed at our department. When I joined AUB in 2004, there were far more women than there are nowadays, and it was closer to 40%. Today, I think we're in line with the global figures, which put that at 20 to 25% at the undergraduate level. But the graduate level, as Marielle has noted, yes, there is a higher increase, but I tend to be a little bit more cautious. I don't think it's because things are becoming better for women. It's actually because sadly, in our culture, more men than women feel ready to leave and you know, pursue a degree abroad. So I've got to be careful there. At the level of faculty, so again, cutting statistics with care. Today I'm one among 7. Last year probably I was one among 10. The year before probably one among 9, whatever that is. I remain one among, and at most is 2 among. So we've got to capture that percentage with also with more accuracy and interpretation. I hope.
Can I get some of the numbers also from the chemistry department? Okay.
2 and 14, Anna Ulara.
So if we wanna get your insight, if we wanna get that insight, you know, in terms of what's causing this leakage, why do we have, you know, a good enough, regardless of the drivers, they're not, you know, leaving the country. Why do we have this leakage in the pipeline when we get to assistant, and then the leakage is even higher as you move up the ladder? Can you give us some insight from your own experiences?
Who's gonna start? Even if, what did you say, Lama? You said that math is not cool? Well, I'm a woman and I think science is cool, and I'm a cool woman.
You are.
So the issue, I think even if STEM or sciences or math looks like it's a boys' club, I think women have a lot to do here. And it's our role. We don't want men to help us incorporate more women in the STEM field. What we want women to bring in their views, their attitudes, to make STEM more cool, more appealing to women. I think we have a responsibility to play here. And it's probably us that
role modeling.
We have to reshape STEM and redesign STEM the way we see it, I think.
Make it STEAM with an A for art.
I think the... Yeah, what was mentioned before, about like work ethic, really creating a gender-sensitive environment, that would help a lot. So, the previous two panelists, they touched on, the role model, the recognition, the women mentoring, all of this would help.
Fatima?
So this is really the message I want to be sending today, and it's like having to put my life in 2 minutes, so I'll try my best. Probably the challenges, I think I can categorize them into two. So there's implicit bias and there's explicit bias. Implicit bias that has been substantiated by research that is more grounded in data science, but sadly, which has been, refuted, and more and more people feel more comfortable refusing to admit that it exists simply because it's bias. So this is all business, and a lot of us have spoken how, speak of tech, and then you would imagine a bro culture, somebody in their garage, producing programs, etc. It's an environment that's perpetuating a systematic devaluation of women's achievements. So you get shorter letters of recommendation, fewer research grants and awards, and invitations to speak at conferences, and sadly, lower citation rates for their research when they're single or primary authors. That women are expected to be 2 to 3 times more productive than men to get the same kind of recognition, and that men and sort of single women are 3 times more likely to get tenured than moms in the field. But I'm actually more recently alarmed with the explicit bias, and I think I invite everybody to probably leave this panel discussion and go find out for themselves. This is recent research that is also based on science, but this is not data science, it's more neuroscience and even social and evolutionary psychology. So these articles are arguing again that because men and women have psychological differences as a result of their biology, women may be unfit to succeed at certain careers in tech. That the reason there are fewer women in tech nowadays is actually because our societies are becoming more egalitarian. And therefore, this is allowing for some sexual dimorphism where individuals become more comfortable gravitating to their intrinsic tendencies. And finally, an environment that is recently advocating, and this is, I think, extremely dangerous, and I'm very happy to refer you to these articles, for the demoralization of diversity. Arguing that calls for diversity promote practices in identity politics that serve to divide and antagonize people, as opposed to promoting justice. And I feel that this cause is being hijacked in the quarrel and wars between left and right. And this is, it's being labeled as some invention of the leftist social justice warriors that, of course, in the people of the rights view, sort of on the rights view, that is actually a fascist cause. And that, I think we need to be aware that this is what our daughters will have to be dealing with, not too far in the future. So.
Thank you. Good caution on this. I think, we can spend hours talking about this, and the best we can do at this point is scratch the surface. And, we have to adjourn this with one last question. So I would like Najat, Suha, and Ghada. We are boldly AUB, and if you had to request one institutional change at AUB in support of women in science, what would that be?
Yes. I would like us to embrace diversity and promote inclusion. And I think this goes beyond just gender.
Very short, because we have 0 minutes left. I'd like to see the mentorship program developed better at AUB. I think we need to recognize the mentors, support them financially, secretarial support, protected time, so that they have the ability to mentor more and more students. There are many role models, as Ghada said, but we need to give them the support to mentor more and more students for the future.
I think it's capitalized on success stories, and we could invest in everybody and have a very low payback. We could invest into the wonderful scientists who are excellent role models, and I think role models is a networking, multidimensional thing. It's not a vertical thing. It's not my senior mentor. I have co-mentors who are colleagues in the States. I have a junior faculty member I mentor who teach me a lot, and I have senior mentors who are role models when I started and still are. So I think pushing forward forward the successful stories. Not because they're successful, enough is enough, let's give to somebody else. How can we help them, support them? Because it feeds into positivity and positive energy. And I think if I have to close with my own wisdom here, I want to quote Michelangelo. And I think the biggest danger is not for us to aim too high and miss, but to miss too low and reach. And I think we really should need to aim as high as possible as what the ceiling is, and there is none for the career of women and supporting women, equally supporting men.
Great, thank you very much. It was a great, lively discussion. I really appreciate your time, and I'll pass it to Huwaida.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank actually all the participants and their fantastic interventions, and would also like to invite President Khoury to give his closing remarks. And if we have time, I hope all the participants can take a picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Huwaida, who really picked this up on very short notice and has worked very hard the last 4 weeks. I want to thank Dina al-Sheikh. Where's Lama? I called her in the U.S. I think it's 6 a.m. I didn't realize she was in the U.S., so thank you very much for agreeing to do this. And really, Trudy and Brigitte and all of you, thank you very much. This has been a very informative session for us. I do echo the concern that students continue to be absent, which is unfortunate because this is their future. So Huwaida asked me to briefly say what we're going to do next, not to prepare a speech, which unfortunately always makes it more difficult, but what are the concrete steps that we're planning to take next, and not to share it with anyone before I shared it with you. So here goes the 90-second version. The first, I think you know, was coming. This has been a very informative year and a half since we charged the task force, and we are going to make permanent the Commission on the Status of Women at AUB that will include faculty, staff, and students. No secrets, Huwaida will be invited, but I think the rest of you will be hearing from us very soon. I'm grateful that Trudy and Brigitte met with us this week, and we have 5 people that we're going to ask to be the Title IX Council, which hopefully Brigitte will agree to chair. As promised, we are actively studying so I'm going to be very candid, I don't love daycare centers. I prefer early learning centers. That's something we played a role in getting off the ground at the school that I was on the board of. I'm happy to say that we have some ideas at looking at an early learning center because I've always admired what Columbia and the University of Chicago did by developing their own schools. I think AUB thought we'd done that with IC and ACS, but back to the drawing board to maybe develop something that can eventually be an AUB lab school. And we're in the early steps of exploring that. More on that in a few months. I am happy that we did reach agreement through a lot of great work by a number of ladies, but especially, I think it's fair to say, Nahla Hawalla, to get an award that will annually recognize individuals, male or female, who can mentor and have mentored women, faculty, and others at AUB. So we'll announce our first winner, I hope this year, on the National Women's Day. The report will be released to the community. It's going to be available to the board and others to study. I believe in transparency, and I think transparency and accountability should start at home, and I haven't been a great advocate for my own family's career, so I think it's good to have the report to the community available. And finally, I've made a couple of jokes that maybe they weren't in great taste, but they should indicate how we think. I've always said that the first time my faculty at Emory came up to me and said, well, we want to talk about work life balance. And I know Huda Zrei, who I've known my whole life, cringes when I say this joke. It was both male and women, male and female. And I said, I'm happy to meet. And after they laid out their concerns, too many meetings at 5:30 a.m., too many meetings at 10 p.m., too many meetings on Saturdays and Sundays, too many interview dinners. They talked about the failure of work-life balance in the department. And I said, I get it. Life is what you get when I take away your work. So I promise to address that in a different way moving forward. I do think we have a challenge with work-life balance in academia. And I've learned a lot about how acute that imbalance is in Lebanon, where women are expected to care for their parents, their children, their family, cook the meal, and still produce the best paper in the world. So I want to focus on this by establishing I hate the word blue ribbon, but I want to say a top flight panel that will involve the deans and some very admirable faculty, which is a mentorship committee. To go to my second joke, I've been concerned for some time, I think some of you have heard it for many years, David and Tom maybe even longer, that I felt that AUB was a relatively mentorship-free zone. And the fact that 14% of women versus 20% of men feel they had adequate mentorship. In a very powerful survey, I think you saw 226 faculty, is and should be cause for alarm. I think we have, and you've heard this from panel after panel, a mentorship challenge at AUB at the student, faculty, and staff level. We have spectacularly successful alumni, and we have an extraordinary group of highly successful women. And one of the major commissions I'm going to charge is a commission, female and male, to look at how we can improve mentorship at every level at AUB. That really is a fundamental challenge for us. I want to thank this extraordinary group for all of your efforts. We will do our best to walk the walk, as I said. It starts with knowing where you're stumbling if you're going to walk firmly forward. So thank you very much. To be continued.